Okay, everyone, so welcome back. I'm really delighted to introduce our next speaker, and that's Kate Cory-Wright, who's showcasing Ecuador. Kate is an award-winning ELT writer with over 25 books published. She's also a teacher trainer and ELT consultant with extensive international experience. She's worked on various Ministry of Education projects in the United Arab Emirates, the Maldives, Mexico, and in her adopted country, Ecuador. Her passions include CLIL, extensive reading, and critical thinking. Without any further ado, over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David. And off we go. So, first of all, I'd really like to say thank you to the organizers. I think this is an incredible thing to organize. It must be so difficult. But the enjoyment for me of just moving around the world virtually, listening to different cultures and different things that you're doing in education, it's so exciting. So thank you very much. Thank you to National Geographic, my former boss. I've written a number of books for National Geographic. And thank you to all of you. If you've just woken up, good morning. If it's late at night, good evening. Okay, so let's get started. Wanted, critical thinking citizens in Ecuador. I'd like to just explain very, very briefly that in 2016, Ecuador completely rehauled its entire reform system, a whole reform of the primary and secondary education. Of course, many teachers are not happy because it means a whole lot of extra work, but I'm sure they're going to love it. And I had the opportunity of taking part in that. And so I want to share with you today a few things about what the new reform contains. And Mexico, you're going to find this interesting because it's very, very similar, as well as other countries perhaps. I'd also like to share with you one of the things that I observed and worried about actually quite a bit, and how I came up with some materials following the work with the ministry, in which I tried to approach this whole critical thinking element. A little bit of background there. I would like to say, obviously, that's me in there, in amongst all the children. And that's because I run classes at the weekends for disadvantaged children. They come to my house for 2 hours at the weekends, and we do essentially storytelling with a cultural sort of bent there. We do life skills. We do computer skills because these children, I gotta say, live in rural areas. Most of their parents did not even finish primary school, and their parents are farmers, don't speak any English, obviously, and many of them don't read and write. So the children are actually getting a really raw deal. During my 28 years here, so this is a bit of background, I've lived here for just over half my life, so you can work out my age there. I've lived in both urban and rural situations, and I've taught in both environments. And I think that's key to today because you get such a different picture. I've also done a lot of training in some of the top schools, as well as the state schools, and taught at 2 of the top universities, the British Council, the Experimento de Convivencia, and also some of the poorer schools. So I felt that when I got an invitation to participate in working on the reform with a group of Ecuadorians and a few other gringos, let's say, gringuitos, as we say here, I felt it was a real honor, actually, because I've loved this country so much, and it was lovely to be able to give back. So, what did we actually do in the overhaul, the reform? I just want to clarify that the point of the national syllabus reform, they were actually doing it subject by subject in the Ministry of Education. And when it came to the English part, it was a little bit complicated because we had, they were introducing English into primary schools for the first time. So we're in our first wave of children going through the system in primary learning English, all right? Interestingly, it covered both state schools and private schools. So there was a kind of an optional for the private schools who have, as many of you know, in Latin America, the differences could not be bigger between the private and the state system. It's shockingly different, as it is across the whole country. For me, I hate the term third world because it always seems to indicate poor and bottom of the pile. But this country has so much that's so kind of, it would put other countries to shame, like the road system, the infrastructure, the hydroelectric dams, the airports, and so on. And of course, you've got such an extreme between the rich and the poor, which is what makes it what it is. So what do we actually put in here? Well, language, for a start. And we worked according to the CEF framework. We had to be kind of very slow and careful and roll it through gradually year by year, because obviously you can't just introduce it and suddenly a primary school kid in their third year suddenly finds themselves in A2 or something like that. It's just not possible. Has to be rolled in bit by bit. We listed, of course, all the competencies, performance criteria, and exit profiles. That's key. So I'm not going to actually bore you with the ministry work that we did. It was very intense, suffice to say. Look at the exit profiles for a minute. Now, all of you in your countries will find that you have exit profiles, I'm sure, if you were to check with the Ministry of Education. Hopefully you know yours. Exit profile essentially is, what do the students at the end of secondary and at the end of primary, what should they be able to do? What can they then contribute to the world? And this is where, of course, the ministry links it to the real world. But it can be a bit odd, as you'll see. So we want, this is so Mexico, I know Victoria are working on it at the moment, in the Mexico one at the moment, the secondary one. So the kinds of things in black have been there for years and years and years. So kids leaving secondary school should hopefully respect their culture, love Ecuador, be very, very proud, and so on. Value diversity. Obviously, Ecuador, like many, many Latin countries, is extremely diverse. We've not only got the Amazon region, we've got the coast, we've got the mountains, and we've got the Galapagos Islands. They couldn't be more different. 4 countries in one, essentially. We've also got tons of indigenous groups, indigenous languages, and diversity in terms of gender. Now, the government actually, it is in the constitution that there are 5 genders. That puts this country pretty far ahead of a lot of others. So don't ask me what they all are. No. What else should a kid be able to do? They should be able to choose a healthy lifestyle and lead it. My goodness. Yes, David, isn't it, really? They should be a responsible citizen with values. Fabulous stuff. It's great. Of course, what happens is that, like in my own school, and I had very good education in Britain, the geography teachers weren't doing it, the history teachers weren't doing it, the maths teachers weren't doing it, and so on. And this is, of course, a coming together of all the different subjects. They have to be able to produce students like this. And the red ones are the key ones. These are the new, this is very much where the new focus lies. So you'll see critical thinking, which is, of course, a buzzword nowadays. Collaboration, the ability to work together in teams and so on. Creativity, developing students' imagination. Now, that's where the previous talk was actually so important, because it covered values, it covered culture, it covered all of these things, collaboration, creativity. And I do want to point out, if you did see that talk, that was a brilliant example of how you would be reaching the exit profile of Ecuador and many other countries. So the new ones in red are very much the key ones, okay? Sorry, down here. Of course, along with digital literacy. Okay. Of course, what happens? What you tend to have, in my experience, what I've seen from 28 years living here, often, as you know, when you're the foreigner in a country, everybody remembers where you live. All the locals are like, the gringa lives up in that apartment up there. Let's go and ask her if she can check our homework, or let's go and ask her if we can do this particular like survey with her or whatever. So it happens a lot where you become involved with homework. And what I find is just so shocking is the kind of homework and tests that kids are being given, and classroom activities as well. So I'm sure you're all familiar with critical thinking, but I like this particular design, because what we've got is the different levels of critical thinking. And the bottom, quite frankly, is not critical thinking, nor is that one. So if the students are simply for homework listing things, the teacher, I've seen plenty of examples of this, the teacher giving students a list of verbs in English and they write the Spanish. Not terribly useful, and they're just recalling information for no particular purpose. You've got remembering in terms of, well, underline things, locate, describe a picture, state where something is, read a text and tell me the answer to something. They're just recalling information. That's not going to get us anywhere near the exit profile, or, quite simply, even if we forget what the ministry says, it's not going to get us to actually creating a country in which people are thinking for themselves. Now, I was wondering myself, where did I learn critical thinking skills? Not sure I learned them at school, to be honest, except for some projects which really got us thinking. Ideally, our lessons should be right up here, getting students to categorize things by different groupings, comparing and contrasting. If it's a text about two animals from the Galapagos Islands, how are they similar? How are they different? Which actually I've put in my National Geographic book. Evaluating. Can you judge something? Can you assess? What does it take to be a champion, for example, in sports? That's from another of materials I've written. What does it take to be a champion? And then, of course, justify it. Tell us what a champion has, so determination, ability, and so on. Think of Simone Biles, who last week, just her amazing ability to do the gymnastics, but the concentration, everything. But can you actually justify it? Say why. So as teachers, are we always asking students to say why? Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Why do you think that happened? What's the possibility that could happen here? And finally, creating. Can you invent or design something based on what you've learned? So I have, for example, an activity that I wrote here. Oh, bang myself in the face with the book, in which I've written about a guy who's blind. He's a runner. This particular guy here with the glasses. He's a runner and he's in the Paralympics, Ecuadorian. So the kids are learning something about culture. They're also being aware of values. And he describes his life. I went to interview him and what an awful time he has on buses, crossing roads. Buses won't stop for him. All that kind of thing. So it's cultural awareness as well. But what's really interesting is the creating part. By the time the students have finished thinking about what makes a champion and how does this particular guy live and what problems does he face, then finally at the end is an activity in which they get to invent or design something to help people like him. In addition, in the project, they can actually go take a recorder and go into a shopping mall and record using, of course, with their digital literacy skills, using what they have learned and making comments about which places in the mall that particular guy and others like him with visual impairment or disabilities, where are they going to have problems? And here's the big question for the project is what can you suggest? Come up with some suggestions for your municipio in which you will put forward some ideas to make life easier. Okay? So, I've seen the worst of the worst. Write 10 sentences using the verb to have, in which the girl, quite honestly, seriously, she wrote, I have a rabbit, you have a rabbit, he has a rabbit, she has a rabbit, we have a rabbit, and so on. And I said, really, do you have a rabbit? And she said, no. I was just like, I see. Well, you've done what the teacher asked. That's what's happening in the classrooms. So this is my big question is, yeah, she's writing all these correct sentences, doing what the teacher asked, and she's literally not using any critical thinking, but the teacher didn't ask for that. So what I found with this particular project, what I learned that was really, really interesting was there really is a massive gulf between what the ministry would like in theory, and I do approve of what the ministry is doing. I think it's the right way to go. We've got to ask schools to produce students who are prepared for the world, who are ready, who are going to do all these sort of going to be so much more than somebody with English and a bit of history and a bit of geography and some facts that they can recall, or they just forget as soon as they leave school. They've got to do that. But there's a massive gulf between their theory and the reality. And of course, this comes down to teaching. Yes, that gap sounds familiar. Absolutely. I mean, it's terrible, really. Now, of course, this comes down to training teachers, equipping the schools, making sure that the teachers themselves are critical thinkers because they're going to teach by example and so on and so on. Yep, Leticia saying in Brazil as well, you've got this problem. And so what I ended up doing when I produced some materials, I thought, well, this is one way to go. It's not the answer, but it's a good way to go. And I've got so little time left, I got to describe very quickly. Okay, I'm going to move to the primary for a moment. Can it be done at primary? Yes. Critical thinking is perfectly possible at primary. I'm going to show you an example here, since I already told you about the guy with a disability, which was for secondary. This one here, in Ecuador, when you buy, I bought some realia here, my favorite jam, whatever you buy here, you will find on the label, now I'm not sure if you can actually see it, push it right up to the screen. Okay, you will see a label there. Now, Mexico has these, and I believe the United States is thinking of introducing them, so we're all way ahead there. And it will tell you what it's high in, that's the red, and what it's low in, right? The idea with the red, it's high in sugar. The red means like basically, ojo, toma cuidado. Don't have too much of this in one day within your within your diet. Okay, so helping us to lead a healthy lifestyle. You'll see other things. What did I bring? Oh, I brought a little bit of mayonnaise, and you can see here. There you go. You've got the same kind of thing. This applies to salt, grease, and so on. So my lesson turned out to be, for primary, look at the grammar for a moment and the vocabulary. Vocabulary, food. Very easy. Grammar, we're doing counts, non-count nouns. We're doing a lot, some, a little. Okay? But how did I introduce it? I introduced it using the system of the foods that we will actually, that the students can get familiar with. They can look at them at home, in their cupboard, in the fridge, whatever, and they can then get the hang of this idea, thinking about what's good for you, what's bad for you. Is it good to have too much sugar? Why? Why not? Maybe bring in something from another class. And so on, incorporating the different amounts of ability. Now, some of that may have to be done in the L1, but it is, at the very least, encouraging them. And perhaps it's a little more interesting than just learning non-count and count nouns, quite frankly, and things. Finally, again, remember with critical thinking, we've evaluated what those symbols mean. We've evaluated and judged why they're used. Are they helpful? Now, for little children, you know, they're primary here, so they can't tell you a lot, but they can say, oh, well, maybe sugar's bad for you. Shouldn't have too much of the red if it says sugar. But the final thing is now to produce your own plates. Design your plates and describe them to the class with food and so on. So, do I believe it's possible? Yes, I do. We've got a long, long way to go, huge gaps between the lovely theory and the reality, but I do actually think the materials is one way, at least to help teachers to get into the habit of doing more of the questions. So why do you think this? Why do you think that? And so on. Okay? That's all I've got time for, but I would like to say I could go on for hours. It's been such fun, and I really, really love this topic, and I love writing materials and everything. This is just my passion. So I will have to finish there, I'm afraid. I have a feeling we haven't even got time for questions. Have we, David? We run out of time for questions even. Post your questions. 5 minutes. He's been very kind. Anybody got any questions you'd like to ask? It's lovely to see so many Latin Americans here, by the way, because I suspect you can relate here to what's going on. Don't give me a difficult one, okay? It's very late at night. Thanks. Yes, we can. Were teachers involved in the creation of materials? Actually, the materials that I wrote, just so you know, it was the secondary one was Uncover for Ecuador, which I wrote with another person who, like me, is a teacher and a trainer and a writer. So we've got all three. Carrie Miller, she has also lived here for over 20 years, and her kids are in the school system, so she gets that very much. This particular one, the Kids Box for Ecuador, this one I wrote together with Jill Hadfield, who's a very, very well-known writer. She's not actually living in the country, so we had to do a lot of cultural, information stuff for her. But with her amazing, amazing ability to create, it was a wonderful experience. Now, obviously, I'm not here to sell the books or anything. I just want you to sort of see some of the activities that we can be doing with students, just to see exactly how far we can take a lesson beyond this kind of simple recall of information. Cecile, is there a way to see some unit from those books online. I don't think there is, and I don't even have the copyright to actually publish them for you. Okay. What I can say though, if you do want to contact me, please feel free on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way. Kate Cory-Wright, and I'd be more than happy, and perhaps I can privately show you an activity or two, okay? That would be my absolute pleasure. So, I think we better finish before the next person runs out of time. Yeah? Couldn't involve with their own experiences. Yeah. No problem. And thank you to all of you. Thank you again for attending and to the organizers.
So
Take good care. All the
I'd like
best.
to say a
Goodbye.
huge thank you to Kate.
Sorry.
I think it's so important, the focus on critical thinking, and I think you really unpacked very clearly the challenges involved in building critical thinking into the English language syllabus, and I think lots of people from the region and around the world could relate to that. So thank you very much, Kate. That was great. I really liked practical examples and I loved the realia especially. So thank you very much again.
I can't pass you the jam though, I'm afraid. Yeah, we're not quite that virtual. Thank you,
so
everybody.
much.
Great to
Thank
see you all. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, everyone. So we're going to take a break now and we'll be back